Buildings are the wealth of nations, our largest capital asset. They are the ornament of cultures, and they are where we spend most of our lives. Some of our more arrogant and careless buildings are at war with time and change, and they always lose. Some buildings, though, seem to flow with time. They flow with us. I've been living and writing in and around San Francisco for 40 years. I've seen the city change and grow. Architectural styles came and went. Planning theories came and went. Real estate boomed and busted. Old buildings were refreshed, new buildings modified. Some got steadily better, some steadily worse. I began to wonder about that. What makes some buildings keep getting better and others not? Since we create the buildings around us, you think they'd be our servants. Instead, most of the buildings we have thwart us constantly. I got so interested in this problem, I wound up spending 6 years studying it. The approach I took was to look at what happens with buildings after they're built. That's when the users take over and begin to reshape the building to suit their own real needs. What kinds of buildings, I wondered, work well with that evolution? And why do so many buildings work so badly? In 1991, a poll of the American Institute of Architects voted I.M. Pei to be the most influential living American architect. In 1986, he designed this, the Media Lab at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Here was a building purpose-built to house a diverse array of disciplines and people collaborating on deep research and fast-evolving computer and communication technologies. I was at the Media Lab when it was brand new. In the 3 months I was there, the elevator caught fire, the revolving door kept breaking, every doorknob in the building had to be replaced, the automatic door closers were stronger than people and had to be adjusted, and an untraceable stench of something horribly dead filled the public lecture hall for months. This is normal. In many research buildings, a central atrium serves to bring people together with open stairways, casual meeting areas, and a shared entrance where everyone sees each other daily. The Media Lab's atrium cuts people off from each other. There are 3 widely separated entrances, each huge and glassy, 3 scattered elevators, few stairs, and from nowhere can you see other humans in the 5-story space. Where people might be visible, they are carefully obscured by internal windows of smoked glass. Frank Lloyd Wright is considered to be the greatest American architect of all time. This is one of his buildings, and it's beautiful, but it leaked from day one. The Marin County Civic Center in California was the last project of his life, but it leaked just as badly as all of his earlier buildings. His clients would say, "The roof leaks," and he would joke, "That's how you can tell it's a roof." Someone should have told him, "That's how you can tell it's a failure." The desire by architects, planners, and politicians to impose a style without planning for long-term use, change, and adaptability can cause all kinds of problems. In Paris, Mitterrand's Grand Projets have had assorted disasters. Built quick to look impressive, these buildings have had a terrible maintenance record.
On est allé trop vite dans toute la construction des grands travaux en général, des grands travaux commencés avec François Mitterrand. Ces monuments ont été vite faits, très vite faits, vite conçus. Et évidemment, on n'a pas pensé que quelques années plus tard, il pourrait y avoir des gros problèmes. Il y a défilé sur la Bastille parce qu'on s'est rendu compte il y a quelque temps que des plaques qui constituaient et qui recouvraient la façade de l'Opéra étaient chancelantes. Et il y a même eu une plaque qui était prête de tomber il y a quelques mois. Donc des mesures ont été prises à l'été dernier, c'est-à-dire au mois d'août 1996, pour poser des filets afin que le public éventuellement ne reçoive pas une plaque sur la tête.
At the Bibliothèque Nationale, the trademark glass towers proved too hot for the books inside. One day of bright sunshine and the books would bake. Wooden blinds had to be added all over the building, hugely increasing the construction costs.
One of the strongest criticisms which has come from researchers and scientists who are actually going to have to work in this library is that the running costs are going to be huge, and to save money the finance ministry has insisted that they buy fewer books. And one of the important things for a French National Library is that they want to safeguard French culture, so they want to buy and stock many French books. They want to be able to compete with the Library of Congress and the British Library. And what's actually happened is that because of all the problems, they're having to save on this very thing. There's all sorts of elements which just don't seem to have been thought through. Why didn't they look first at the book, the reader, and then go from there? I think they did the opposite. I think they looked at the building first and thought of the reader last.
The building material of the late 20th century is glass. It is also the problem material. In many new buildings, there's too much of it, in the wrong places, doing the wrong things. At the John Hancock Tower in Boston, the glass fell out. All the windows had to be replaced, and the interior of the building had to be completely restructured because of its failure handling wind loads. Here at the Western Morning News building in Plymouth, designed to look like an enormous transparent glass boat, few people would deny that this was a dramatic and powerful statement building. Visible across the harbor, shining in the night sky. But something is wrong when a glass panel in the vast atrium smashes for no apparent reason in the first year of use, and blinds have to be put across the windows because the building has trouble handling solar heat gain and loss. Other glass buildings may intend to dazzle the viewer, but their reflective brightness on a hot day is literally blinding. The alternatives, such as these tinted, unopenable windows on the BBC's own White City building, may keep out sun and dazzle, but a wet, wintry West London day makes basic daylight an unobtainable luxury. When a building doesn't work, the owners have three choices: put up with it, try to change it, or one of the main problems is that architects and their clients often concentrate more on the look of a building than its eventual use or function. Works of architecture tend to have great facades that will look impressive and original in the magazines. But the ways in which these buildings might work, develop, or grow don't appear in the magazines at all, and so they're given low priority.
One of the things that happened with facade architecture is that on a very large scale new techniques of construction were attempted without, in many cases, enough research, enough care to make sure that the way in which the buildings endured and matured and improved over time could be achieved. The important thing was almost the initial flash, the first impact. What happened subsequently wasn't anyone's job.
The Dancing Building, locally known as the Fred and Ginger Building in Prague, is a dramatic new addition to a re-emerging city. But how do you clean it? The fire department's cherry picker, originally used for the job, can only reach halfway up the building. Now they use mountaineers.
Myslím, že stavitel
Stavitelé dneska vůbec nepřemýšlejí o tom, jak ten barák se bude udržovat a nehledí ani jako na částku, že zbytečně vydají moc peněz. Měli by si to zařadit do rozvrhu té stavby. Nejtěžší část na tom čištění je vždycky moment, kdy se na to lano nalejzá. Tam je velký nebezpečí prasknutí toho skla.
Corporations and others like to select these high-profile personality architects, and then, of course, you want them to make, quote-unquote, a statement. And very often, their statement has very little to do with the actual use of the building. As a matter of fact, some architects pride themselves in the fact that their buildings are dysfunctional from the start. We had this one. There's a number of American architects who advertise that don't expect their buildings to work because they're pieces of art.
The pathology of this system is that images become detached from reality. Images are everything. What actually happens inside buildings, what the buildings are for, becomes forgotten.
The renowned French architect Le Corbusier once argued that people should adapt their lives to suit his modernist buildings. At Pessac in France, they did the opposite. As soon as they moved in, the residents started to change the buildings to suit the way they lived. They built pitched roofs and shuttered windows, walled open spaces, and added corridors and extensions.
J'habite ici depuis 57 ans. Nous avons fait un petit salon de jardin. Et puis alors après, nous avons fait le garage. Et puis dedans, nous avons mis du matériel. Et puis alors là, sur le côté, mais on ne peut pas le voir. On peut pas le voir là. Nous avons fait un atelier.
La conception de cette maison était assez bizarre. La maison était habitable parce qu'elle était retapée, mais elle n'était pas adaptée à 5 enfants. Il a fallu transformer les cloisons, faire une petite pièce par-ci, transformer cette buanderie qui était pas une cuisine, on l'a transformée en cuisine car à l'époque, la conception de la cuisine était au premier étage. Le petit salon que vous voyez là, c'était un garage.
Ironically, in the last 20 years, new owners moving to Pessac have wanted to restore Corbusier's original vision and have been given grants to eradicate the changes and additions made by the earlier residents.
Alors nous avons essayé de concilier à la fois, j'allais dire, un respect de l'œuvre première et puis les nécessités imposées par la vie de tous les jours. C'est-à-dire
on a quand même commencé par tout casser.
Oui, on a cassé tout ce qui avait été ajouté.
Tout ce qui avait été ajouté, oui. Et ça, c'était une option de départ déjà. Oui,
pour ensuite, effectivement, adapter les transformations un peu aux nécessités de la vie courante.
C'était impératif. Je crois qu'il est venu un moment où nous n'arrivions plus. Nous débordions les murs de la maison.
Mais de toute façon, j'allais dire, habiter une maison comme ça, c'est aussi un style de vie particulier. C'est-à-dire qu'il faut savoir se débarrasser d'un tas de choses inutiles. Autant dans l'ameublement, c'est-à-dire qu'il faut effectivement lécher ses parents, le buffet Louis XIII et les fauteuils capitonnés. Il faut, j'allais dire, se contenter du minimum. C'est tout un style de vie, mais moi qui me plaît beaucoup.
C'est-à-dire que
c'est une espèce de purification, j'allais dire un peu en quelque sorte, vivre dans une maison Corbu.
Ce quartier, c'est un quartier comme un autre. Bon, il porte le Corbusier, c'est un fait, mais enfin, vous savez, ça aurait pu rester comme c'était. Parce que ça fait beaucoup de dépenses, déjà. Ouais. Il a fallu refaire, ils ont tout refait l'intérieur et tout, ils ont dépensé des sommes extraordinaires. Alors même abusive, c'était abusif. Non, moi je ne... Non. Et tous nos anciens, vous savez, nous avons la même idée. Ils auraient pu laisser comme c'était. C'est tout.
Work environments are continually changing. Most of us spend most of our time in offices, and most offices don't work very well. They're too cramped, and they don't adapt easily to new uses and new technology. So people customize their spaces any way they can, and they complain, but it's as if no one is listening. Chartered surveyor John Vail conducted a survey of people in offices. His subsequent report, The Occupier's View, had some alarming conclusions.
70% were unhappy with the provision for security. Almost 70% were concerned about their air conditioning. It didn't work or it was inflexible. Window cleaning, 70% felt that the facilities were inadequate. A similar percentage thought that signage on their estate or on their building was poor. Only 1 in 10 buildings had been revisited by the architect after they'd been in occupation. Now, it begs the question, how can we know how people react to detailed design features if we don't go and revisit the scene of the crime?
Quite a lot of buildings, as soon as they're finished, the user comes along and totally reverses all the ideas that were there in the brief. We get intimately detailed briefs of how to make, say, a hospital, and about 2 years on, it's totally different. They've moved the accident and emergency into a different place, or the people whose offices were there are no longer in that same place. And we don't realize that. The buildings change and change and change because all the people who use them have their own ideas. And that's good. But we have to know that. We have to have a much greater understanding of that organic change that takes place in all buildings.
The central problem is that architects don't want change in their buildings, and so they make it as difficult as possible. But change is inevitable because some things won't work and have to be fixed, and usages will change and you have to remodel. If the building fights those changes, the result is bound to be expensive and ugly. That's why architects don't learn from their own experience. I asked one architect what he learned from his earlier buildings. He said, "Oh, you never go back. It's too discouraging." So how do architects learn? It might be useful to look at the buildings they're trained in. University architecture school buildings are always designed and built with great fanfare, and they're often the most despised buildings on campus. Worcester Hall at the University of California, Berkeley is an example. Designed by not one, but 3 famous architects, it's ugly, inside and out. There's not enough seminar rooms, the mechanical systems don't work, and the whole thing is so high and narrow that colleagues go for months without ever seeing each other.
I'm so happy, 'cause today found my friends are in my head. I'm so ugly, that's okay.
In the first years of Worcester Hall, architecture students attempted suicide by jumping from this stairwell into a courtyard where nobody ever goes. They couldn't be rescued because the ground floor doors were locked and nobody could find the keys. It's a bad idea to give students vertical opportunities.
I think people have lost confidence in themselves. To a large extent, that's been done by members of my profession, because it's somehow the building has become the province of the architect. It's sort of his plaything, if you like. And the architects have worked quite hard to convince users that they don't know anything about architecture, and that therefore you've got to have this architect helping to figure out how this building is going to be. I mean, it's even reached the point where people have interior decorators come and choose their own wallpaper, for God's sake, you know. So that this lack of confidence, which has been fostered in the population, is a manipulation that has actually been caused partly by the media, largely by the profession. And so, but of course it's tremendously endangers the fabric of society, because if people lose confidence in themselves to that degree, then the adaptation of the environment to common sense and to everyday use disappears.
A model of a learning building that develops and changes over time is the Palazzo Pubblico in Siena. All architects are taught to admire it, but they aren't taught how it became admirable. This building grew into its glory, gradually, over 500 years. Who was the main architect? Time. The earliest part of the building, the ground floor, dates from 1284. The piano nobile, or first floor, was added in 1310. The spire was completed in 1325. 35 years later, a mechanical clock was added. Then, a Christian monogram. Then the Medici arms. In 1680, the building gained a crenellated tower, and in the 18th century, a belfry. The building has taken over 500 years to evolve. Here in 1997, the portico is being remodeled.
For architects, there's perhaps a lesson in the Palazzo Pubblico. It might save their profession and give them more work and respect than ever. All they need to do is stop defying time and put time to work. Evolutionary design is healthier than visionary design.
Contemporary buildings can learn about time, flexibility, and evolution from models like Siena. In London, the firm of Addison Wesley Longman learned from the mistakes in one of their previous buildings, a building that proved impossible to adapt or remodel. So they created a new building that is alive to the possibilities of change.
Any business has got to take account of the fact that it may never always be the size it thinks it's going to be, so it needs to be able to change and adapt. And we wanted to be able to build smaller pockets of space so that we could perhaps downsize if that was needed to be the case, or we could change our minds about something and we could sublet some of the space. We wanted to be able to have some individual offices and create pockets of space between those individual offices so that although people were in an open space, they didn't feel as if they were in some kind of vast football stadium, but did feel as if they had their own territory and their own individual cluster of spaces. And indeed, we're quite relaxed about the fact that people are able to decorate their own spaces and personalise them. Why not? We also wanted a building which made it much easier for people to communicate with each other. The old building had been very closed. We wanted a building which was more open, where people would move around it more and see each other and perhaps spark off something that I've heard others call chance encounters. We also, from my facilities management point of view, wanted a building that was going to be easy for us to maintain and preferably quite cheap to run. But I suppose most of all, we wanted a building that would be a pleasure to be in.
When we build, let us think that we build forever. Let it not be for present delight, nor for present use alone. Let it be such work as our descendants will thank us for. John Ruskin said that. At the ING Bank in Amsterdam, the architects go back periodically to see how the building has evolved. The people who work in the building are frequently asked how the place might be improved, and the possibility of future change and adaptation is always encouraged. The building is light and airy, even in the middle of winter. One design requirement was, no one sits more than 20 feet from a window, which you can open. You can park your car underneath the Japanese garden. Noise is reduced by shaping the exterior in such a way that the sound of traffic is reflected back off the building rather than into it. And there are gardens and running water inside and out.
One of the most, I think, important points was to make a friendly building, a building for a human building, where you get some contact, you know, not an office paying something like this, but a friendly building that when people are coming, just make open forms, you know, not closed forms, but even so when you see the stair, it's an open form, not a closed form. But it must be a friendly building where people feel all right, where people can work very hard, because when the building is friendly, then you can do a lot of good business. When the building is terrible, people will always be ill. But when the building is like at home, it's all right. We are living in a very, very fast way. Managers have to make decisions all the time, every day, every minute of the day. And I think what I learned from this building, our experience, is that you have to be quiet. And when the influence of the building on people is stressy, fast, white, without color, make people more and more giving stress. But you have to be quiet to do your work very, very good. I always said, I have no time to be in a hurry. Because when you are running in a building, in corridors, you know, then you are just going faster and faster and faster. And then you are falling.
Whether it's a home, a commercial building, or an institutional edifice, buildings keep changing because people either have to or want to keep reworking them to suit the unfolding patterns of their lives. Architects understandably want their buildings to be finished and perfect, but it's impossible. Reality makes a new building necessarily unfinished and imperfect, but perhaps perfectible in time. If that reality were designed for, architects could do civilization a great service. Buildings need to learn, the same way we do. Give them time.
Next week, I'll be looking at cheap, unnoticed buildings that people adapt and change at will. Leftover buildings, huts, sheds, shacks, boats, and mobile homes. They're neither noticed or celebrated, but most of the world's work is done in these low-road buildings, and some of the most creative people live in them.